Alright, so welcome to my second deck tech. The first one I did is Duretti, and I'll link a video to that if you're interested. But for today we're going to be looking at one of my favorite commanders of all time. This is Tasigur the Golden Fang. Tasigur is a 4/5 for 5 colorless and black. He has a delve ability, so you can make it cost 1 less for each card you exile. And his real kicker ability is paying 2 and green or blue twice, 4 mana total. You put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then an opponent chooses a card from your graveyard to put back into your hand. The way I play this deck is not like traditional builds. I don't include all of the 100% absolute staples into the deck. This is more just like a fun deck that I play around with. Alright, so, I'm missing core things like an Eternal Witness. I just don't really like running that card in this deck. There's no real reason. Some cards in here are really weird, and you may even consider them dumb choices. But this is more of a deck that I just like to play to, just have fun with and, see where it goes. When the deck kicks off, it's great. When it doesn't, you're sometimes left a little bit frustrated. But I built this deck on my own. I didn't really look at deck lists or anything else. I just kind of went through all of my cards and added anything that I had that was relevant to be put in. I've changed the deck maybe 20 or 30 times already as well. But right now, this is just a fun build. Alright, so first thing we'll do is we'll take a look at the land base. Alright, so first thing we're going to look at is the lands. This deck only runs 32 lands in it. The reason being, there's a lot of mana generators in the deck, artifacts, mana rocks that give you items, there's creatures that tap for mana, there are creatures that let you search for lands, and there's a bunch of stuff that brings lands out. So running less lands, it actually works quite well in this deck. So let's take a look at our cards. Alright, first thing we got is the Command Tower. Taps for 1 mana of any color to my commander's identity, so this gives me all 3 colors with no consequence. This definitely needs to be in almost every commander deck, unless they're monocolor, in which case, even then, you might be able to justify running it. Alright, an Opulent Palace comes into play tapped, adds black, green, or blue. This is just making sure that you get all 3 color accessibility. City of Brass, same thing, does damage to me every time it becomes tapped, but it does give me extra mana. One of each color that I need. It's worth taking the damage. Similar idea applies to Mana Confluence. You pay 1 life to get 1 mana of any color. Another great card that you just want to run in here, because you need usually all 3 colors with great accessibility. Sometimes double, sometimes even triple of a mana color. Alright, Watery Grave. Obviously the shock lands need to be put in here because they can be pulled from fetch lands. The fact they come into play tapped unless you pay 2 life. Usually it's worth it to pay the 2 life to get utility from it, but if you know you don't need it, like turn 1 or turn 2, whatever, just toss it down, leave it tapped, don't lose the life. I just got this in a Oath of the Gatewatch Fat Pack. I got a Sunken Ruins. I'll link to that video too down here if you guys want to check it out. But it's called a Filter Lands. It taps for colorless, or if you can generate blue or black, you can use that and tap it to get blue-blue, blue-black, or black-black to your mana pool. It's just great for mana filtering. It's a really nice way to manipulate colors to get what you need. I will eventually want to put in the rest of the filter lands, but right now I just put in this. Once again, this deck is just stuff that I've put together from what I own. Temple of Deceit comes into play tapped. When it enters, you scry 1. It's great for filtering out stuff that you want for Tasigur. So if you have a land on the top, you could leave it on the top. So when you activate his ability, you get to toss, the land into there, giving them 1 less choice, so they might have to give you a slightly better card. Hissing Quagmire comes into play tapped, adds black or green, and you can pay colorless black and green to make it a 2/2 Death Touch to end a turn. That makes it a very, very scary card in here. I would usually sacrifice a land to kill off an opponent's scary creature. And sometimes they don't even notice that I can use this and activate it, so I'll activate it and I'll block and kill off their thing. Right. I do have a couple dual lands. I have a Bayou in here because, well, I have one. It's just a land that adds black or green. It's kind of like a shock land, but better. Yeah, I put it in. Why not? I might as well use some of my dual lands. Right. Overgrown Tomb. It's basically a less better Bayou, but it's still fetchable by fetch lands, and it does the black or green. 2 life, once again, not a huge price to pay. I put in a Simic Growth Chamber. Basically, it taps for 2 colors, and then it bounces another land to your hand. There's a few utility cards in this deck that, I'll use that are lands, and having them come into play again might prove themselves useful. I only chose the blue-green one because I want that to integrate with Tasigur's ability every time, especially if I can eliminate the 2 colorless activation ability from Training Grounds, which you'll see a little bit later. But I did toss in one of these, and it's also nice not putting in every single variation of each type of land. Makes the game more fun. A Temple of Mystery, just a blue-green Scryland. Hinterland Harbor comes into play tapped unless you have a forest or an island. I usually have one, so this is just a free dual-color land drop. Breeding Pool, another shock land, fetchable, so of course it has to go in this deck. And these are utility lands. Bojuka Bog comes to play tapped, but exiles a graveyard. There's quite a few cards in here that let you search for a specific card like a land. And having this is nice in case your opponent is playing some serious graveyard stuff. Halmar Depths comes to play tapped and lets me look at the top 3 cards in my library and put them back in any order. This is great because if first turn I play this, I look at the top 3 cards, I can take the one that I want, next turn I can play a fetch land and shuffle the deck, just putting them back into there. Being able to bounce this back to my hand might also prove useful for later setup. Reliquary Tower is a must-have in this deck. It gives you no maximum hand size and taps for colorless. So when you start using Tasigur's abilities like crazy with Seedborn Muse, which lets you basically use Tasigur every turn, I'll talk about that a little later, you're going to have a lot of cards in hand. More cards in hand means more card advantage, and not having to discard those cards is a great way to stay above and advantageous towards your opponent. Alchemist's Refuge. It's a nice little card that gives you blue-green and tap. You can cast non-land cards this turn as though they had flash. So a field clearance card, or a sorcery, or a creature that I need to put into play to do some serious surprising, this is a great card to keep in here. Alright, I put in the 5 fetch lands from Khans of Tarkir. Windswept Heath, even though it looks for plains as a possibility, the forest can cover everything with the shock lands and also the dual land. Alright, I have a foil Delta. It's nice to brag about this. This is actually the first pack of Khans of Tarkir that I opened, but search for black or blue, an island or a swamp, so great utility. Just once again using this for the forest. I can grab any color from that. Flooded Strand, same idea, search for any of the islands. Bloodstained Mire searches for any of the swamps. At some point I will get the original fetch lands. I just want them to kind of go down in value at some point, so I'm not breaking the bank to use it. The other thing about these lands that's great is when you sacrifice them, you have another card in the graveyard to accelerate the release of Tasigur, because you can exile it from your graveyard to make his cost a little bit cheaper. There have been times through the use of fetch lands I've been able to get Tasigur out like turn 3, just because you get fetch lands in and a bunch of other utility stuff. Alright, I put in some basic lands as well. It's just nice to have them in case you get hit by a Blood Moon. Maybe you can use these utility lands to get something done. Also, a couple cards search for basic lands. Alright, so I put in 2 swamps, 3 islands, and 4 forests. Once again, this is personal build. There's probably better theories on how to build the land base, but to me, the land base is perfect for how I like to play it. And it makes it more fun and interesting. When you have a 100% competitive level deck, it's really not that much fun if not everybody else is playing on that crazy competitive level. So Tasigur is fun where you have a lot of good stuff, but it's not so perfected and fine-tuned that, it's still a fun deck to play with. Alright, next up we're going to start looking at cards based on their converted mana cost. Alright, so, looking at our first ones, the 1-drops. One of the must-have cards, it's a Birds of Paradise. This is, I believe, Japanese. I bought the Japanese Izzet versus Golgari theme decks, and they came with some foreign booster packs. Opened it up, and I got a, I believe, Japanese Birds of Paradise. It's green mana for a 0/1 flying, and it has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Using this with Tasigur, obviously this is a fantastic card to drop turn 1. He gives you the mana diversity you need, he's a 0/1 chump blocker, and he's just mana acceleration toward everything you want to use. Alright, so definitely must have. Alright, another card I got in those packs was an Elvish Mystic. It's just green mana for a 1/1, and it taps to add green to your mana pool. I replaced my Llanowar Elves because this one's foreign, and it is also foil. So, just a little bit of a pimping out my deck. Alright, I put in a Vampiric Tutor. Search your library for a card, shuffle your library, put it on top of it, you lose 2 life. Vampiric Tutor is such a fun card to run in this deck. It's just basic utility, it has some competitive aspects to it, but given the rest of the cards in the deck, it's a fun card, it's a must-have, and I had one lying around, so I decided to use it. Training Grounds, one of the first cards that seriously powers up Tasigur. Alright, so with Tasigur and Training Grounds on the field, Tasigur's ability now just costs blue-green twice. So blue or green. So I could pay green-green or blue-blue or blue-green to get the top 2 cards in my library into my graveyard and then get something back. Training Grounds makes everything really, really easy to use, and there's a few other cards that also have some activated abilities that Training Grounds can help out. Put in a Careful Study. That's just blue, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards from your hand. It just gets me through the deck. Like I talked about on the lands, being able to draw some extra cards, I can discard some of the heavier casting stuff that Tasigur can bring back later. It also helps towards the Delve capability on Tasigur, so you can get him out even earlier. So this card nets you 3 cards in the graveyard, makes Tasigur cost 3 less. I put a Ponder in. This is also one of the first cards you're probably going to start seeing sunglasses drawn on my cards. I got bored one day and decided to just draw some of the common, or the more common cards. It didn't really ruin the value of that many cards, so it was fun, and it gets a little laugh every once in a while, because they're so horribly drawn. But Ponder. Blue, sorcery, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put it back in any order, you may shuffle your library, and then you draw a card. This is great to just look at what's out there. You can also look at the top 3, let's say you need one. Next turn you could also drop a fetch land and shuffle those back in. Preordained, very similar, you get to scry 2, then draw a card. Just looking deep into the deck to grab exactly what you need. Brainstorm, I like using Brainstorm, especially with the fetch lands. You draw 3 cards, you put 2 cards from your hand back on top. And let's say there were cards I don't really need at this current point in the game. I'll use a fetch land to shuffle them back deeper into the deck. Serum Visions, you draw a card, then you scry 2. Just another cantrip, just a 1-drop that nets you a card that is great to use. And finally, I also put in a Gitaxian Probe. Usually your opponents will give you Gitaxian Probe back, hoping that you'll either spend the 2 life, or you drawing a card is more of a gamble as opposed to a controlled return to your hand. So with Gitaxian Probe, though, I love using it. You can look at your opponent's hand and then do everything else you need. And you can do it for only 2 life, as opposed to actually having to tap mana to play it. So Gitaxian Probe is amazing. In multiplayer, yeah, it's not as powerful because you can't look at everybody's hand, but even able to look at one player's hand who you're just worried about, it's a great way to drop it in. Alright, next up we'll look at our 2-drops. Alright, so now we're looking at the 2-drops. The first card in the 2-drops that I have is the Hermit Druid. 1 in green for a 1/1. Pay green, tap revealed cards on the top of your library till you get a basic land card. Put it into your hand and everything else into your graveyard. You may have noticed there were like 8 or 9 basic lands in this deck. So you're going to dump a ton of stuff. And this could be done turn 3. Possibly turn 2 if you get a mana creature on turn 1, like a Birds of Paradise. So you can use Hermit Druid incredibly fast in this deck, and then you can get Tasigur out the next turn, and then you have an entire graveyard of good stuff to pull out. Some other things you can do with this is, just later on in the game, you can just dump a bunch of things into the graveyard. I've played with this card politically. Let's say opponent swings at me with a large creature, and another player is getting swung at. I can use Hermit Druid, hopefully to get something good into the graveyard. Then I can activate Tasigur's ability, and then have the other opponent who's in the same situation as me bounce something useful to my hand, like a Cyclonic Rift or a way to destroy the oncoming assault. So Hermit Druid is a really, really fun card to just get emergency stuff into your graveyard in large quantities. Just be careful though, he may put a lot of quote-unquote junk that you don't want in there that your opponents can now pick from for Tasigur. Coiling Oracle, it's such a fun card to use. Comes into play, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it into play, otherwise put it into your hand. This is a great way to get a land into play turn 2. Or, you could even go one step further just to get cards into your hand, giving you more card advantage. If your opponents give you this back from Tasigur, it's a chump blocker, and it also gives you a lot of acceleration towards more Tasigur abilities or more cards in hand. Sakura Tribe Elder, another must-have card in here. 1 in green for a 1/1. You can sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put it into play tapped, and shuffle. He's a great card to put into here because he counts toward Delve. He brings you extra cards. He's a chump blocker with a sacrifice effect, and he's very, very cheap to run. So he's a must-have for here. Regrowth, 1 in green is a sorcery to get any card from your graveyard to your hand. Let's say Tasigur accidentally mills your Reliquary Tower, which gives you no maximum hand size. You can use this to get that card back. Or if your opponents have been trying to not give you a certain card that you've been wanting from your graveyard, you can always use Regrowth to get it back. Illusionist Bracers. Whenever the equipped creature has an activated ability that's used, you can copy it. Attach this to Tasigur. All of a sudden, you have 2 sets of Mill 2 and get a card back. Combine this with Training Grounds, and all of a sudden you are getting a very large number of cards back every turn. Cyclonic Rift, must-have for any deck that runs blue, especially because the Overload cost only has a single blue mana in its cost. If it was maybe 3 blue mana in here, I think Cyclonic Rift would be less hated by people. But it's a great card. You have to run it in blue. If you don't run it, I mean, everybody else will, and you'll be on the butt end of it. Right, Baleful Strix, blue and black for a 1/1 flying Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. This card has so much utility. It's a 1/1 flyer, it's a chump blocker with Death Touch, and it replaces itself. If your opponents keep giving you this back from Tasigur, you're just getting that much more utility. Alright, Animate Dead, 1 and black for an enchant dead creature. Basically, remove a creature, or take a creature from a graveyard, put it into play, attach Animate Dead to it. It gets -1/-0, but this can be anybody's graveyard. So running this in here, you can use it for your stuff, or you can start using it for your opponent's stuff. It's another must-have for this deck. Demonic Tutor, basic staple tutor, gets you any card you need. It's great in emergency situations. Put in a counter spell, obviously to counter some spells. There's a lot of threats, a lot of things will try to hurt you. So this deck runs a lot of cards that have control magic in it. Sylvan Scrying searches for any land, usually Reliquary Tower, just to, keep your hand size protected. Curse of the Swine, X and blue, exile X creatures. Each creature exiled this way, you get a 2/2 green boar creature token. This is nice for playing politically. Yes, you've exiled your opponent's amazing creatures, but they still got 2/2s. If your opponent only has 2/2s as their field presence, they might give you back a Curse of the Swine to take out another player's army. So, it's kind of like a situation where, yeah, they're going to hate you for it, but they're not going to be that mad at you, just because this helps you, helps you kind of help them. So it's kind of a compromise. And also a Phantasmal Image. Comes to play with a copy of any creature, except it gets an illusion, and whenever you target it, I have to sacrifice it. It's great for just dropping it out. You can even copy a mana creature just to get some more mana acceleration, or if your opponents drop a huge threat, you can copy them. Alright, so, 2 drops. Once again, we got some more land advantage, just some fun stuff that helps run the deck, a bunch of political stuff, and a lot of really fun things. Next up, we'll look at our 3 drops. Okay, moving on to 3 drops. So, first thing we have is a Coalition Relic. Not to brag, but it's foil. I got this in one of my first Future Sight packs, but it's 3 mana. You can tap to put a charge counter on it, or you can tap for 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. The thing with the charge counters, though, is at the beginning of your first main phase, you remove all the charge counters from this, and then you get 1 mana of any color for it. So, if you play it turn 3, end of your opponent's turn, you can tap for a charge counter. Once your turn starts up, this is untapped, and it gives you 1 mana of any color to your mana pool for your main phase. So really, this on turn 4 could produce you a total of 5 mana, given your already existing lands. Coalition Relic is just great for mana diversity, and it also gives you that kind of build-up, where at the end of your opponent's turn, if you know you're going to do some serious stuff, you can get a charge counter on the artifact. And you could tap it that turn for it. Darksteel Ingot, same thing, it's just 3 mana for a 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Fantastic card. The fact that it's indestructible makes it even better. Alright, Chromatic Lantern gives all your lands tap for 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and this also can tap for 1 mana of any mana to any color to your mana pool. So, some of the lands that maybe do damage to me, like the City of Brass or the Mana Confluence, this gives them another way out. This also turns my utility lands into rainbow lands, and even my basics become all color lands. Right, Commander Sphere, another one, 3 for the artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color to my commander's identity. So once again, all 3 colors, and I can sacrifice this to draw a card. So even in a pinch, it can give me an extra card for my hand. Fate Spinner is just a great way to slow down your opponents. It's 1 blue for a 1/2, and it makes them choose one of the following steps: their draw step, their main phase, or their combat phase, and they have to skip it. So it really can help slow down your opponent. The way I see it is it takes away, about 10% of their potential turn. and it really makes them decide what they want to do. It also gives you insight of what they're thinking, what they're trying to do. Maybe if they keep skipping combat, but they have a large creature out, maybe they're doing something to try to make that creature more protected, and you can kind of knock it off before they decide to put it in. Like give it protection or something. Alright, we have Forbid, one of the best counter spells in the game. It's 1 in blue, counters a spell, but you can buy back by discarding 2 cards. Once you start getting Tasigur, you get a Training Grounds out, or you double his ability, you start getting cards back to your hand again and again, you can just use them to keep buying back Forbid, and you can keep any threat at bay. Dominating Listed is just another fun card I like to use. I love the art. It's just a completely awesome pirate. But what he also has is 1 blue, and it's for a 1/1. And this actually, if you look at the art very carefully, the Listed is a little creature attaching to the pirate. It's not his actual head. It's not his actual hat. So it's cool that that's the creature as opposed to the actual guy on it. But you pay 1 blue and tap. It becomes a creature enchantment that says gain control of the creature. And what it does is you basically take one of their creatures. The cool thing is, though, if they decide to destroy it, or, right at the end of combat it's about to die, you can pay blue to end the effect, and he can go and attach to another creature. This can all be done at instant speed as well. So if you steal an indestructible thing in response to a field clearance, not only is the indestructible going to be not affected, but also this will not be affected if it's destroying all creatures. You can also attach it to your own creatures just to hide it as well. Alright, Void Slime, my second favorite counter that I can afford. Obviously I'm not going to buy a Force of Will. But it's green and blue. You can counter a spell, an activated ability, or a triggered ability. It's basically a counterspell fused with a Stifle. And it is such an amazing card to run. It knocks out anything. You can stop Planeswalker ultimate moves. You can stop field clearance. I mean, it really just is a well-rounded utility counter. I run Crows and Grip because, well, they can't respond to it at all, so you start knocking out artifacts and enchantments that maybe have a sacrifice effect or, something that they can use last minute. Once Crows and Grip is on the stack, nothing else can be put on. That's what makes Split Second so much fun. And it destroys an artifact or enchantment. I put in Pernicious Deed. Not only is it just clearance against things that really, really annoy you, but it's also token clearance for free. So if your opponent has like 10 1/1 goblins out that are tokens, you can just sacrifice this for 0 to destroy all of them. Sudden Spoiling makes all your opponents 0/2 creatures. If you kind of build up an understanding with another player, or kind of like a teaming up, you can keep getting this back with Tasigur by having them choose your card, and you can keep knocking out your opponent's assaults. Propaganda is just a nice little kind of fort to get behind. It's 2 in blue for an enchantment, and each creature that attacks you, your opponent has to pay 2 for that creature. It doesn't prevent against Planeswalkers, but it's still just a fantastic card to run in any deck that has blue because it slows down your opponent's assault. 2 mana to attack, well, it's 2 mana that could be used for something else sometimes. And getting one of their opponent's life totals lower is sometimes not as important as having 2 colorless mana open. Yavimaya Elder, another guy that lets you just keep getting lands. It's just crazy amount of utility. 1 green for a 2/1. When it's put into a graveyard, you can search your library for 2 basic lands, put them into your hand, so you can start grabbing some basics to get you some more mana acceleration, and you can pay 2 colorless and sacrifice them to draw a card. So his overall effect is 1 green for a 2/1. When you sacrifice it, you can pay 2, well, you can pay 2 to sacrifice them to draw a card, and you can start getting lands. So 1 card nets you 3 and a chump blocker. Necrogen Mists. Later on in the game, this is just a great card to put into here that just keeps hurting your opponent's hands. With Tasigur, it's not a huge issue. You can just keep getting stuff back, and you can use Tasigur's ability to kind of neutralize out your discard thing, because no matter what they give you, you can just pitch it to Necrogen Mists. Sultai Charm. It's just a lot of utility. You can destroy a monocolored creature, destroy an artifact or enchantment, or draw 2 and discard a card. If you use the draw 2 and discard a card, you just accelerate more stuff in your graveyard for Tasigur. Rhystic Study, one of the best, basically card advantage devices in blue, in my opinion. 2 in blue for an enchantment. Whenever your opponent plays a spell, you draw a card unless they pay colorless. So now, all of a sudden, you're putting a tax on every single one of their spells. Usually this sees 1 or 2 cycles going around, and you'll draw 3, 4, sometimes 5 cards from all of this stuff. Especially with the less experienced players, they'll just give you the card because they want to drop a lot of things from their hand. So more card advantage and more stuff for things like Forbid, or hopefully you have Reliquary Tower out and you can just keep holding the game on control. I put in a Trigon Predator. It's a great card. It's 1 green and blue for a 2/3 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, you destroy an artifact or enchantment they control. If your opponent's running heavy artifacts or enchantments, this thing kind of keeps their artifacts and enchantments at bay. So just keeping them a little bit controlled. A 2/3 flyer. It's a nice body. And yeah, it sometimes connects and does some very annoying damage to your opponent. And finally, also I put in a Capsize. 1 blue, return a permanent to its owner's hand, or buy it back for 3. Once you start getting some serious mana, you can start, even on a one-on-one, you can start bouncing lands to their hand, and if you can net 2 lands per turn, you just slowly out-advantage them. Alright, so that's the 3 drops. We're looking at 4 drops next. Alright, so for the 4 drops. Clever Impersonator. He comes to the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. So he can copy creatures, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers. I mean, it's pretty much anything. He can even copy a token if your opponent gets a serious token out. So this thing has so much utility. You can copy some of your mana rocks if you need extra mana, or creatures that have some seriously powerful effects. Pretty much whatever you need, you can do some serious copying with. Right, Notion Thief, one of my favorite cards. It's 2 blue and black for a 3/1 flash. So he's got a decent block presence already. It's not the best, but the fact that he has flash, sometimes your opponents will not see it coming. But the real power with this card is if your opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw during their draw steps, you get it instead. I've seen this card interact with so many different things. You play a card where each player draws a bunch of cards, you can steal those. I've even, against one of my other decks, I've flashed Notion Thief in response to a Burning Inquiry, which is red, each player draws 3 cards and discards 3 at random. So Notion Thief gives you 6 cards, you discard 3 at random, and then your opponent's net effect is discarding 3 at random. Alright, Spike Weaver. He's basically a fog on a creature. 2 green for 3/3 because it comes to play with 3 counters. Pay 2 and remove 1 to put it on another creature, so you can kind of make your other stuff a little bit more powerful. But the real power behind this guy, pay 1, remove a +1/+1 counter from it, and prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by creatures this turn. So that's 3 times that Spike Weaver will completely save you. If you find some other stuff to keep him alive, or you keep bringing him back from the graveyard, you can keep fogging out the entire game. It's just nice to put yourself behind a damage prevention system. Glen Elendra Archmage, 3 in blue for a 2/2 flyer. Pay blue to sacrifice it, counter target non-creature spell. That alone is amazing. On top of that, the persist ability is even better, because it comes back to play and you have another sacrifice. Or if you want to get really creative, you could even take Spike Weaver, remove a counter, put it onto Glen Elendra after it comes into play with persist, and the counters will cancel each other out. So you can kind of keep using Glen Elendra for some great utility. And finally, last 4 drop is the Skyshroud Claim. 3 in green, sorcery, search your library for up to 2 forests and put them into play, then shuffle your library. I have shock lands, I have a dual land in here. Those are great for just getting out mana diversity and fixing up whatever you need. And that brings you up to 6 lands, which, worst case scenario, pulls out Tasigur from there. So Skyshroud Claim, amazing card to run just to get some extra lands, and it puts them into play, so it's immediate acceleration. Alright, that's the 4 drops. We're moving on to 5 drops next. Alright, so our 5 drops. Seedborn Muse is a must-have. Untaps all permanents you control during each player's untap step. So I have creatures, lands, and artifacts that all give me mana. So at the end of each of my opponent's turns, I can use Tasigur's ability and then have the untaps ready for counters or for more Tasigur triggers. Prophet of Kruphix was just recently banned, which was basically a very similar card. It was 3 blue and green for a 2/3. You could play creatures as though they had flash, and you untap all lands and creatures during each player's untap step. So Seedborn Muse, just about as good, sometimes better, sometimes worse. She doesn't give me the flash ability, but I'll take it. This is a great utility card to put in. And a 2/4, it's an okay blocker. Painful Quandary is a card I threw in because I really like making my opponents think about which cards they want to play. It's 3 black for an enchantment. Whenever they cast a spell, they lose 5 life unless they discard a card. Usually I'll take Clever Impersonator, and I will copy this, so now it becomes either 10 life, or discard 2 cards, or discard a card and lose 5 life. It just keeps whittling down your opponents, and the fact that it doesn't affect you in any way makes this card a great thing to just kind of hurt the field a little bit. Murderous Cut. It's one of the first delve cards I have in here. I only have a couple. I actually like leaving stuff in my graveyard, but every once in a while you want to start delving out things that you don't want. So with Murderous Cut, it's 4 colorless and black, destroy target creature. But to delve it out, let's say, I have some cards in my graveyard that I know my opponents will give me, like a Gitaxian Probe, or, just something that doesn't have exactly what I need. I can use Murderous Cut to get rid of 4 cards from there, and it also becomes black to destroy target creature. And it's an instant, so it makes it very, very useful. Primal Command, 3 green, and it gives you the ability to choose 2. I really like cards that let you choose different things. This gives a player 7 life, or puts a non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library, or target player shuffles a graveyard into their library, which may help me quite a bit. Or you can search your library for a creature card, put it in your hand, and shuffle. I'll probably take my Seaborn Muse, and I'll either take the 7 life, or I'll put a non-creature permanent on its owner's library, or if my library is getting low, I'll just shuffle everything back in so we can start repeating Tasigur from scratch. Primal Command is great just because it gives you choices, so if your opponents decide to give you this card back, they may not know which choices you're going to choose. Crooks of Fate is the budget version of Damnation. It's 3 black, choose 1, destroy all dragon creatures or destroy all non-dragon creatures. This is about as affordable as it can get for a Damnation. I'm not dropping $40 or $50 on a field clearance card, because knowing my luck, they'll probably reprint it in like a Modern Masters or something else like that. So I'm kind of waiting out on it, but for now, Crooks of Fate does the job for me. Fool's Demise is a card that a lot of people really don't see the use in until they have it and they use it in a game. It's 4 in blue, you can enchant a creature, anyone, so you can even enchant your opponent's creatures. And when the creature dies, or it's put into a graveyard, it gets returned to play under your control. Which is great, because you can actually steal stuff prior to a field clearance. On top of that, when Fool's Demise is put into a graveyard from play, you return it back to your hand. So you can start grabbing other stuff, or you can put it back onto the creature to ensure it comes out. Sometimes I'll put it on Tasigur, and I'll just use that to keep Tasigur to come back into play right away. And then Fool's Demise can be put back on him the next turn. So it's almost like a totem armor in a way, but not exactly. And it's nice that Fool's Demise keeps coming back to your hand. There's actually a couple creatures in here that I like to put Fool's Demise on as well. Acidic Slime is one of them. Comes into play, you can destroy an artifact, enchantment, or land. It's 3 green for a 2/2. The creature also has Death Touch, which makes it very useful for intimidating your opponents from attacking you. Corrupted Conscience, once again another card that most people don't see the value in until they completely use it in like a game. You basically steal your opponent's creature, you control it, and it gives it Infect. Here's the thing though, you don't have to use it on an opponent's creature either. You could put it on something else that's in the deck, which later on we'll see some of the stuff in here. And yeah, it really makes some big moves, especially if that creature has flying. Now it has flying and Infect, and it becomes a much scarier threat. Treachery, another control card. Cool thing about this card is it resets your lands, so 3 blue, comes into play, untap up to 5 lands, and you control the enchanted creature. So I steal it, and I untap lands. So I can leave Tasigur's ability open after taking a creature. Bribery is another card, 3 blue, search target opponent's library for a creature, put it into player control, then they shuffle. So I can grab their biggest thing from their deck, and I can happily put it into play on my side. I may give it Corrupted Conscience to give it an additional degree of Infect, and make it even scarier. Solomongar's Command, another choose 2. It's got some good utilities in here. You can counter a non-creature spell, return a permanent, give a creature -3/-3 till end of turn, or I can destroy a planeswalker. These are very particular, but they're so diverse that you'll probably end up using these quite effectively. And finally, also put in Consuming Aberration, 3 blue and black, power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. And whenever you cast a spell, they all mill until they hit a land. Alright, so this is just a fantastic card to put in. I will put Fool's Demise on top of Consuming Aberration, so it hits a mill trigger, swing. They're probably going to try to kill it because it's gotten big by then. That's fine, it comes right back into play. and then I put Fool's Demise back onto it, and I rinse and repeat on the land milling. Also, what I like to do is, that's where I put Corrupted Conscience on as well. Consuming Aberration gets larger and larger, and then all of a sudden you give it Infect. I have a 25-25 Infect. Well, that's starting to get kind of crazy. Alright, those are the 5 drops. Let's move on to the 6. Looking at our 6 drops, the first one we have is the Sire of Stagnation, 4 blue and black for a 5/7, Devoid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, they exile the top 2 cards of their library, and I get to draw 2 cards. Just a great way to turn my opponent's land play into my benefit. They top deck and they draw a land, they're going to think twice before playing the land. And this kind of slows them down, it makes them think, and most of the time it actually just nets me extra stuff. If they're playing fetch lands too, that's even better for me. I put Confiscate in, 4 blue, you control enchanted permanent. I like having a large degree of things to steal. Often with Confiscate, I'll take something that's like a very efficient mana rock, like Gilded Lotus, or something like that. That gives me extra land utility and removes my opponent's ability to generate mana. I can steal creatures, enchantments, artifacts, even their lands if I want. So Confiscate is just a great card to start grabbing stuff. Deadeye Navigator, it's pretty much a must-have in any blue deck. 4 blue for a 5/5. As long as it's paired with another creature, each one has 1 in blue, exile it, and return it to the battlefield. There's a bunch of cards that have come into play effects in here. There are creatures that have persist. Deadeye Navigator is a great card that I can use to just kind of blink it out. Spike Weaver, I can also use that to have, pretty much unlimited fogging as long as I have the mana to pay for it. And also just, it's a decent body. It's a 5/5, and that blink ability, though, is so powerful. Alright, and finally, we also have Progenitor Mimic. It comes into play as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it gains at the beginning of your upkeep. If this creature isn't a token, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of it. So, let's say I take something like, let's say Sire of Stagnation. I can keep making copies, so now when my opponent plays a land, I do some serious stuff. Maybe make some copies of Consuming Aberration. The sky's the limit on what this guy can do to keep making copies. He can just make copies that let me draw a card when they come into play. So there's a lot of really, really useful stuff that a copy that keeps making more copies can do. Especially when your opponents start playing some very, very large stuff as well. Alright, that's the 6 drops. Moving on to 7s. Alright, on to the 7 drops. Elder Scale Worm. It's 4 green for a 7/7 trample. When it's to the battlefield, if you have less than 7 life, your life total becomes 7. And then it kind of gives you a you can't go lower than 7 ability when concerning damage. So as long as you have 7 or more life, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 7 reduces it to 7 instead. Your opponent goes infinite and gets 1,000 tokens that are going to attack at you every turn. You just keep Elder Scale Worm at play, and it kind of keeps them at bay. And also, I have a Sepulchral Primordial. It's 5 black for a 5/4 Intimidate. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, I can grab a creature from your graveyard and put it into play under my control. It's nice to steal some big stuff from your opponents. If Consuming Aberration already hit a few times, Sepulchral Primordial gets a lot better. Those are the 7s. We just got a few cards in the 8 drops, and then we're done. Alright, we have Dig Through Time as our first 8 drop. 6 blue. It's got Delve, so I can kind of start grabbing stuff and removing it from my graveyard. Less choices for my opponents. And it lets me look at the top 7 cards to grab any 2 cards, put them on my hand, and the rest on the bottom of my library. It's great for an emergency dig. You can try to grab whatever you need, and hopefully you can grab something that will help save the game. All right, another 8-drop Woodfall Primus, 5 green for a 6/6 trample. When it comes into play, destroy target non-creature permanent. You can start picking away at lands or artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers. It's just great for destroying stuff. And it has Persist, so when it dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. With stuff like Deadeye Navigator, you can trick that Persist ability to keep going again and again and again. Deadeye Navigator can turn Woodfall Primus into a huge destroying force. And finally, the real card that kind of knocks into the win condition, Possessed Portal. It's 8 mana for an artifact. If a player would draw a card, they skip that draw instead. So no one's drawing cards for the rest of the game, as long as this is in play. At the end of each turn, each player sacrifices a permanent unless they discard a card from their hand. So not only does it lock your source of card draw, but then it also starts making you throw away cards in your hand or sacrificing permanents. With Tasigur, though, his ability says nothing about drawing. So with Tasigur, you mill 2, you get 1 back, and then you pitch it to Possessed Portal. If you can do 2 activations of Tasigur's ability every turn, basically turns down to your opponents can no longer draw cards, and you start getting 1 card net back from your graveyard every turn. So, that's pretty much the Tasigur deck. He's a lot of fun. You know, it's a great deck to run. I know this isn't the ideal build, but a lot of the stuff is things that I either had lying around, or I just bought a couple things to help spice up the deck. Yes, it has a very long way to go before it becomes a quote-unquote professional deck, but I also don't like playing those types of decks. I like to think my way through things, I like to do weird things, I like to do stuff that most people aren't 100% prepared for. With Tasigur, I like to just call it a good stuff deck. You know, it's got a lot of good things in it, and it's just fun. So, that's pretty much it for Tasigur. I hope you enjoyed watching. I have a previous video on Duretti, and at some point I'll probably be making another Commander deck tech analysis. I have like 7 or 8 decks, but a lot of them run proxies that are in other decks, or I've dismantled them, or I just don't have the time to go into depth with it yet, or the deck is just not complete. Alright, so, hope you enjoyed watching. This is Brian Fadouk signing off.